If you're a successful, busy woman who is feeling stressed and you're wondering, what should I be eating? Should I do keto, carnivore, low carb, fasting? It's very confusing, and I want to explain to you what is the best strategy for you to follow right now. So if you have asked yourself, is it keto? Is it low carb? Is it carnivore? Is it fasting? Is it detox? Is it low calorie? What is the best nutrition plan for me to be following? Because there's so much information out there. It's one of the questions that I get asked all the time from women when they email me. And I get it, right? Even I look at stuff online and I think, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. And it really isn't that overwhelming, okay? Because if you look at diets or dietary regimes or protocols throughout history, they work, right? Ketogenic works, just not for everybody. Same with carnivore. Low carb is good for some, not for others. Fasting can be really a way to get to peak performance, but for some it's exhausting. So where do you start and what do you need to know? And that's what I want to cover. So you have to look at where you are right now because food is medicine. It's not a one size fits all. So you have to look at where you are right now and determine what you really need. So if you're exhausted, you're not going to do keto, carnivore. It's just going to push you further into fatigue. Same with low carb, right? Or fasting. It's going to be an absolute no-no. So you have to look at, well, I want more energy. I want to sleep better, but I also want to lose weight. So what do I do? If you're stressed, if you've been feeling the effects of stress, like poor sleep and exhaustion and overwhelm and anxiety, this is where you should start because any other protocol is going to generate more stress in the body. Like keto, fasting, carnivore is going to create more stress for you right now. And I'm going to explain why. And when we are in periods of chronic stress, it disrupts systems in the body that need to be repaired. And we need nutrients and a certain number of nutrients in order to fix that. And thirdly, the other reason why it's so important is because your nervous system needs to be regulated and you need to be out of fight or flight mode to get your best kind of health, well-being, mental health, and metabolic health, right? So if you're stressed and exhausted and you're trying to do keto, your body's in fight or flight mode. It's really going to struggle in that place. Or maybe you don't struggle, but you just don't see the results. And this is why. So the first thing I look at is carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are really important to switch off the stress response. It helps to regulate the nervous system. And this is why we crave sugar or carbs when we're stressed. Carbs will activate your thyroid hormone as well, particularly T3, which helps to create energy, mental energy, and burns body fat. Carbs also regulate cortisol, so having a nice natural cortisol curve in the morning, which is essential. We want high cortisol in the morning, tapers down, and it's lowest in the evening. Stressed women, what we often see is that it's high in the morning, it can dip, and it comes up again at nighttime, creating poor sleep. Carbs will also help to improve nighttime sleep, make sure that your body's doing all the repair work overnight and needs carbohydrates for that, and it will balance glucose levels. When we have periods of chronic stress, our body finds it very hard to maintain our glucose levels, and carbohydrates will help with that. And I'm going to talk more about, because it's not just a case of eat whatever carbohydrates you want. So normally when I talk about these, people are like, oh, I'm diabetic or I'm insulin resistant or carbohydrates are bad, right? I'm not saying eat sugar and go out and eat pasta, right? I'm talking about cycling carbohydrates in a very strategic way, small amounts, the right dose at the right time, and the right type of carbohydrate will switch off that stress response. And what that means is that you're going to have energy, high energy all day long. There's no 3 p.m. slump where you hit a wall and you're just having coffee and more sugar. It's going to regulate that cortisol curve, so it's going to reduce anxiety and overwhelm, and it's going to balance glucose and insulin and prevent cravings and give you energy for the brain, give you a lot of focus and concentration. So cycling carbohydrates, even if you're diabetic or you're insulin resistant, I have a lot of women that come into my programs exactly the same. And what they find is that because they're able to relax that stress response, get their system out of that fight or flight or overactive nervous system, it allows their metabolic system to do what it's meant to do, right? So, a lot of the shaming of carbohydrates, isn't directed in the right way, because when you're in a stress state, we need to shut that down, right? In order for your metabolism to do what it knows how to do. So people come through my programs, they're type 2 diabetic or insulin resistant, they lose weight, their glucose levels improve. Some people have come off their diabetes medication as prescribed by their doctor because their metabolic health has improved. So the first thing Carbohydrates switch off the stress response. Stress response is very important to switch off before you do anything else. Okay? I really try to kind of hone that in and drum that into people in my work, is because when that nervous system is overactive, things get shut down. Digestion is shut down, hormone production is shut down, prefrontal cortex is shut down for, deep focus work. Like, our body is in a state of trying to survive, not thrive. And so if you're wanting then your body to do all these other things like lose weight and do fasting or whatever, you're asking too much, because your body is in shutdown mode. Okay, it's in low battery mode, and it's only doing the essential functions to keep you going. And so what we want to do is get it out of low battery mode or low power mode, so you have full function, and then we can start to do the repair work and get your metabolism elevated. And so once we look at, reducing that stress response, getting the system regulated, the cortisol regulated, then you can look at things like detoxes. And that's what I do in my work, because gut and liver, when we go through chronic stress, our digestion is shut down. So we don't digest our food properly. It impacts our microbiome, and it creates fermentation. We start to create bacterial overgrowth. So there's a bit of a mess in the gut, but then it also creates a lot more toxicity, and it breaks down liver detox pathways. So they need to be repaired. We must relax the nervous system first before we can do that, because, as I said, cortisol is having this huge impact, or stress is having this huge impact on our gut. It doesn't make sense to try and repair the gut while there's all this stress hormones flooding towards the gut. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So it's very strategic in order. And so when you do that initial reset of the nervous system, you can start to do the repair work, the gut and the liver. So these things are important for elevating your mood, because a lot of our happy hormones are produced in our gut, reducing brain fog, having mental clarity and concentration and deep work and focus. And the liver detox, the liver repair, is important to remove toxins and inflammation from the body. It helps to activate our metabolism as well. So really key features of these systems, and these are the ones that are really affected during stress. Now, next I want to talk about fasting, because it's definitely a hot topic. I think it's kind of had its peak and now it's on the way down. And particularly when we look at women and fasting, it's all very different, because our hormones look for different things. But fasting is a great tool to get yourself into peak physical and mental well-being. I use it in my programs at a later stage, right? But it's definitely a great tool, because there's so much goodness that comes from fasting, right? There's stem cells being released. There's cellular cleanup. Like, there's all these things that are happening that, we used to do fasting a century ago, do I want to say? I don't know, probably less, where there was religious fastings, there was less access to food. Now we have 24/7 access. And so there was more periods of prolonged fasting, which there isn't now. And so I'm definitely a fan of fasting because of all the health benefits that come with it. And I really see fasting as one of those tools that not only for peak performance, but as your health insurance, right? But I won't go into that here. But fasting cannot be done if you're overtaxed, right? If you're stressed, if you've been pushing yourself really hard, even though you're probably still pushing yourself, but you are not sleeping that well, you are feeling tired, and you are stressed, right? You're getting set off. And in that case, we still need to relax the nervous system. And so women come into my programs, they've been fasting, they feel terrible, they feel irritable, they're not losing weight. They're like, what am I doing wrong, right? Other people are getting results. Why am I not getting results? And that is why. The nervous system is already stressed, already overreacting. And now you're taking away nutrients that are important to repair the nervous system and the gut and the liver. You're taking a certain number of calories, not that I count calories, but a certain number of calories needed with the nutrition to do the repair work. It's just not there. And so therefore the system is struggling. And so fasting is a great tool, but it could take months before you can do fasting, right? It could even take years. It took me years to get my body into a place where I could do fasting, right? And it's not even something that you have to worry about, because if you're feeling amazing, which, women come through my programs and they're doing the nervous system reset, the gut and liver repair, they feel amazing, right? They're not concerned whether they can do fasting right away. But it's definitely a tool long-term for peak performance and, like I said, your health insurance. So just to rehash, you got to look at where you are right now. If you're stressed, and this is what this podcast episode is about, you're a successful woman, you're stressed, you're still pushing yourself, I know, but you're really starting to feel the effects of that stress, right? You're not feeling like yourself anymore. Then you want to start with carbohydrate cycling. You do not want to go low carb. Then you want to repair key systems that are involved during stress, the gut and the liver, looking at repair work there. Then you can bring in fasting, or then if you want to bring in weight loss programs, right? So I run a weight loss program, which is focused more on hormonal, nourishing the key hormones that control our metabolic burn rate. So again, I'm not cutting out carbs, I'm not cutting out major food groups, I'm not counting calories, right? Really nourishing the hormones that control the metabolic burn rate. Things are a bit more strategic than just, eat less and exercise more or anything like that. The one thing I would say though is if you're looking at weight loss, again, stress, you want to address that. You want to do it in that kind of order as I'm explaining it. But if you do something low calorie, your metabolism is not really going to forgive you for it, right? Because studies have shown that as you reduce calories, your body becomes accustomed to living on a certain number of calories, right? So it's 800, 1,000, 1,500, whatever it is a day. And then when you go back to eating normal amounts of food, your metabolism doesn't just go back to where it was, right? It stays. It's lowered itself to survive on low calories. It stays there, right? And so this is why women gain weight when they quit these low calorie things. So don't mess with the hormones, right? The body is quite very, very intelligent. But at this point, all I wanted to say was you could bring in either fasting or a weight loss program after you've done that initial stress reset and repair work. And let's talk about keto and carnivore, because I definitely use these as well. And it really is a case-by-case basis. I've used it with women who, keto and carnivore in particular, if I see someone with a lot of immune reactions, like food sensitivities, allergies, as I look in their pathology results, I can see that there's just way too much inflammation in there and it's very hard to pinpoint where it's coming from. Something like carnivore is really just stripping back, right? Taking out a lot of all foods that are going to create a reaction. And then we can start adding from there. So keto and carnivore is something you can do intermittently. Keto is better. Carnivore is so, I think the carnivore police will come after me with this. But I've done the carnivore and it's definitely a great, almost like a detox, because it's getting rid of a lot of those, since foods that can create allergens and sensitivities and gut issues and whatever. So I've used them in chronic conditions where people have chronic gut issues. They have very high insulin resistance, okay? So the fasting insulin is very, very high. But again, I still do the pre-work of the nervous system reset, the repair work, and then that, okay? So often I will have women come into my program who are like, I'm doing keto and I'm fasting and I feel terrible and I'm not losing weight. I just feel cranky all the time, right? And that's why it's important to do in that order as what I've said. Okay, so hopefully this podcast has kind of cleared up a few things, because it's one of the things that I get questions on all the time. And I completely understand how overwhelming it is with all the little tidbits of information that you get online. But nothing is comprehensive. Nothing's a system. Nothing's looking at your pathology. Nothing's understanding where you're at right now. And nothing's a full system, okay? It's just tidbits of information. And if you follow that, it can create more harm than good, right? I've definitely seen it for myself and my clients. So I hope this has been helpful. If you're, like I said, if you're stressed, if you're feeling tired, you're not sleeping that well, and your anxiety or overwhelm is rising, even if you have weight to lose, you still want to start with the carbohydrate cycling. I'd love for you to leave me a comment below. Was this helpful? Was this clearer? Do you know where to start now? Let me know in the comments.